The great question. Imagine waking up one day and realizing, truly realizing, that the battles you've been fighting your entire life all feel strangely familiar. You change your job, your relationships, your city. You try new routines, speak new affirmations, write in fresh journals with fresh pens on fresh mornings. And still, somehow, the same pain finds you. The same arguments, the same empty feelings at 2 a.m. The same loneliness, masked with busyness. Different faces, different places, but eerily similar endings. It's as if some invisible hand is guiding you back into the same emotional loops, the same self-sabotaging decisions, the same internal chaos, wearing a different outfit. You begin to wonder, am I cursed? Am I just broken? Or worse? What if it's me? Not in the self-blaming way you've already tried to escape, but in a deeper, more disorienting way. What if there is a part of you pulling the strings from beneath the floorboards of your awareness? A part of you that seeks out this pain on purpose? Carl Jung didn't believe in coincidence, at least not when it came to the psyche. He once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That one sentence is both a mirror and a bombshell. What if the bad luck that always seems to find you isn't luck at all, but a reflection? What if the universe isn't conspiring against you, but merely reflecting what's still unresolved within you? That would mean every heartbreak, every betrayal, every missed opportunity, and every cycle you swore you'd never repeat wasn't random. It was a lesson returning with a different face, an unlearned pattern echoing from your shadow, the unconscious, unseen force within you. But here's the unsettling paradox. The more you try to fix these patterns with sheer logic, the more they twist and mutate into new forms. You can see the pattern, feel its weight, know its consequences, and yet you still walk into it again. Why? What makes us so magnetically pulled toward our own suffering? Why do we recreate the very dynamics that broke us? Why is it that some people escape their trauma and others seem to build a life entirely out of it? Are we really so free, or is freedom just another illusion when the deepest parts of ourselves remain hidden? You may have thought healing was about adding more knowledge, more tools, more positive thinking. But what if it's actually about subtraction? Peeling back the layers of pretense, seeing what hides behind your persona, confronting the creature lurking in your emotional basement. Not the pretty version of you that posts wins and smiles. The raw, unfiltered self you hide even from your own thoughts. Jung called this the shadow, the sum total of everything about yourself that you refuse to acknowledge. Your repressed rage, your hidden envy, your guilt, shame, and fear. But here's the terrifying truth. What you bury doesn't die. It festers. It leaks out in your tone, your choices, your emotional addictions. It chooses your partners, decides your limits, and frames your entire sense of possibility. You think you're navigating your life with free will, but in truth, much of it is automated by the parts you've never dared to face. What if your shadow is not just a container of pain, but also the architect of your repeated mistakes? What if it's not simply your past that haunts you, but your refusal to meet it? Think about the people you've hurt even when you swore you wouldn't. Think about the promises you made to yourself in the silence of your rock bottom, never again. And yet, again. Not because you didn't mean it, but because willpower is no match for the unconscious. The real question is not, why do I keep doing this? But rather, who inside me keeps doing this? And why? What benefit, what protection, what payoff does the mistake offer in disguise? This is where Jung's work forces a confrontation that no one escapes, unscathed. If the patterns in your life feel too precise to be random, too painful to be accidental, and too repetitive to be coincidence, then maybe, just maybe, they're trying to show you something about yourself, something essential, something that has been waiting quietly for you to stop running. Because what you don't integrate, you project. What you don't heal, you repeat. And what you don't own, you will encounter again, dressed as fate. So the real question becomes, if your life is the mirror, what part of you keeps cracking the glass? And if you had the courage to look beneath the reflection, what would you find there? The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. There is a quiet machinery beneath your thoughts, a clockwork of the soul, hidden from sight but never from consequence. It is this machinery that Carl Jung dedicated his life to unveiling, not with sterile clinical detachment, but with the passion of a man who knew that the human spirit was far more labyrinthine than textbooks could ever admit. To Jung, the psyche was not a simple problem to be solved, but a universe to be understood. And at the heart of that universe lies the unconscious, a sprawling terrain filled with forgotten memories, rejected emotions, ancestral imprints, and the countless decisions you never realized you were making. It is here, in the deep unconscious, that the root of your repeated mistakes lies waiting. Not because you are weak, or stupid, or doomed, but because you have never truly seen what drives you. Most people believe they are conscious beings, acting with intention. But Jung would argue that we are more often puppets than performers, animated by inner scripts we didn't write, but which govern us with frightening precision. Every time you find yourself saying, "I don't know why I did that," the unconscious is speaking. Every time you attract the same kind of partner who wounds you in the same kind of way, it's not fate, it's the shadow. Every time you sabotage a good thing, abandon your goals, or fall back into the habits that once destroyed you, it's the return of what was never resolved. And here's the thing, the unconscious isn't evil. It's not trying to ruin you, it's trying to complete you. To understand this, we must explore what Jung meant by the shadow. It is not merely the dark side of your personality. It is everything you have rejected in order to survive, to be accepted, to feel safe. Think of a child who grows up being punished for anger. That child learns to bury rage, to pretend to be good. But the rage doesn't disappear, it moves underground. As an adult, they may now attract explosive partners or erupt in passive-aggressive sabotage. Not because they want to, but because the shadow is seeking expression. It wants to be seen, integrated, owned. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." Jung took this further, believing that without confronting our own inner monster, we become vulnerable to projecting it onto the world. In other words, the things you hate in others are often mirrors of your disowned self. If you deny your capacity for manipulation, you may see manipulation everywhere. If you deny your own selfishness, you may be perpetually surrounded by people you perceive as selfish. This is why your repeated mistakes often feel like déjà vu. It's not just life repeating, but you. And here's the hidden trap. Society encourages this blindness. From a young age, you are taught to curate your identity, to be polite, productive, agreeable, successful. But in the process, entire parts of your psyche are banished. Emotions like envy, lust, resentment, fear, and despair are labeled bad, so we repress them. But what is repressed does not. What vanish, it metastasizes into addiction, into emotional numbness, into broken relationships, unfulfilled potential, and lives that look perfect on the outside but feel hollow within. The shadow is not dangerous because it exists. It's dangerous because we pretend it doesn't. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering stemmed not from the world itself, but from the endless striving of the will, a force that craves, clings, demands, and never rests. Jung might argue that it is precisely because we are unconscious of this inner striving that we become enslaved to it. The person who always ends up in toxic relationships may secretly crave chaos because it mirrors unresolved childhood wounds. The one who sabotages success may carry guilt about outshining their parents. These inner forces are not always logical. They are emotional truths encoded into the body, truths that do not care whether you understand them, only that you obey. Modern psychology has its own language for these truths: cognitive distortions, emotional schemas, attachment wounds. But no matter the terminology, the principle remains the same. What is not healed will be repeated. And because the repetition often hides behind new faces, new jobs, new opportunities, it fools us. You think you've moved on, but really the wound has just changed its clothes. Jung called this phenomenon complexes. Emotional hotspots in the psyche that distort your perception, hijack your reactions, and override your logic. These complexes are autonomous, meaning they act like mini-personalities, operating independently from your conscious will. You can be calm and rational in most areas of life, but when your complex is triggered by a tone, a memory, a glance, you become someone else entirely. And afterward you wonder, what just happened to me? This is the ghost in the machine, the reason you keep repeating the same mistakes. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's that you are using conscious tools to fight unconscious forces, like trying to reason with a dream while you're still asleep. The shadow does not respond to logic, it responds to awareness. Compassionate, fearless, ruthless awareness. Not to fix it, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because underneath every repeated mistake is a deeper truth you haven't yet faced. A need that went unmet. A pain that was never voiced. A fear that shaped your worldview. And unless you confront those roots, your life will remain a carousel of variations on the same suffering. You will change the scenery, but the play will remain the same. And here is where the philosophical becomes practical. If you want to stop repeating your mistakes, you don't need better habits. You need better questions. Not, how can I be more productive, but what am I afraid I'll discover if I slow down? Not, how do I attract better people? But, what part of me keeps choosing pain? Until you ask those questions, you will be ruled by answers you didn't know you were living. So, what lives beneath your decisions? What secret scripts are still guiding you? And are you ready to go where the light doesn't reach the unseen consequences? Now imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a mirror, one that doesn't reflect your face but your choices. Not just the obvious ones, like the career you picked or the city you live in, but the subtle ones. The tone you use when you're afraid, the words you swallow instead of speak, the way you flinch when someone gets too close. This mirror doesn't lie. It shows the loop you've been trapped in for years, maybe even decades, yet you've convinced yourself it's just life happening. You may even pride yourself on learning from your mistakes, thinking that reflection alone is enough. But if that were true, why do the same feelings return? Why do you still find yourself chasing people who aren't emotionally available, or tolerating jobs that drain your soul, or avoiding silence? Because it threatens to reveal something you're not ready to hear? The consequences of not confronting the unconscious aren't loud. They don't always come in the form of crisis. They're quieter, more insidious. They show up in the form of a low-grade dissatisfaction you can't explain, a restless hunger that no achievement seems to satisfy. They manifest in relationships that feel almost right, but never quite. In friendships that don't nourish, in moments of joy that are short-lived because guilt always creeps in to steal them. This is the invisible architecture of your life, the scaffolding built not by your conscious mind, but by the shadowed regions you've never fully illuminated. And the longer those structures remain hidden, the more your life becomes a series of reruns in different packaging. You get older, but not wiser. You gain experience, but not transformation. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious will continue to speak until it is heard, and when ignored, it doesn't stay silent. It screams through patterns, through projection, through somatic symptoms that medicine can't explain, and anxieties that no rational thought can quiet. You may think you're anxious because of your job, your partner, your bills, but often anxiety is the language of the suppressed self trying to claw its way to the surface. And this is where modern life complicates things further. Because society offers you 1,000 ways to avoid yourself, endless content, instant gratification, performance over introspection. We've built a world that rewards appearance over authenticity, consumption over contemplation. So instead of listening to our discomfort, we sedate it. Instead of sitting with our triggers, we swipe past them. Instead of facing our shadows, we externalize them, blaming others, shaming ourselves, numbing with distractions. But the cost of this avoidance is staggering. When you don't confront your shadow, it doesn't go away. It hijacks your story. It picks your lovers, filters your reality, and edits your truth until it's no longer yours. You begin to live not as who you are, but as who you think you need to be to avoid pain. And slowly, without noticing, you abandon yourself. Not in dramatic acts of self-betrayal, but in small, daily compromises. Saying yes when you mean no. Smiling when you want to cry. Pushing forward when you need to pause. The world sees someone functional, but inside you feel fragmented, haunted, disconnected from something you can't name. That's the shadow's doing. It doesn't just repeat mistakes, it erodes identity. Let's take relationships as an example. Why do people find themselves in the same toxic dynamics again and again? It's not because they enjoy suffering, it's because the psyche is trying to resolve what it never got to finish. Jung called this repetition compulsion, a term borrowed and refined from Freud, referring to the unconscious drive to recreate early emotional wounds in new contexts, hoping for a different outcome. You don't fall for someone who resembles your first heartbreak by chance. You fall for them because your inner child wants redemption. You don't tolerate emotional neglect because you're weak. You do it because deep down it feels familiar. And in the psyche, familiarity often masquerades as love. Until you bring this unconscious drive into awareness, it will drag you through the same pain again and again under the illusion of choice. And it doesn't stop at relationships. Your creative blocks, your procrastination, even your chronic indecision, they often point to unexamined fear. Fear that you're not enough. Fear that if you succeed, people will finally see the parts you've hidden. So you sabotage yourself, not out of laziness, but out of protection. You stay small because your shadow still believes it's dangerous to be fully seen. And until you examine that belief, you'll continue to dim your light, call it humility, and wonder why. Fulfillment feels just out of reach. Even your dreams are not safe from this unconscious sabotage. You may think you're chasing purpose, but often you're chasing approval in disguise. The career you built might be a monument to your father's expectations. The degree you pursued could be your attempt to outrun childhood shame. The goals you set might not be yours at all, but echoes of other people's voices you mistook for your own. And the tragedy is, even if you reach those goals, you will still feel empty, because nothing built from disconnection can ever offer true wholeness. This is why Carl Jung insisted that the goal of life is not perfection, but individuation, a process of becoming whole by integrating the unconscious into consciousness. It's not about fixing yourself, it's about finding yourself, all of you, even the parts you've been taught to fear, because only when you meet those parts with honesty and compassion can you begin to rewrite the script. Only then can you break the loop, not by force, but by understanding. You don't change your life by denying your darkness. You change your life by making peace with it. So the real consequence of ignoring your inner patterns isn't just repeated mistakes, it's the slow erosion of your inner truth. A life lived on autopilot, a self constructed from fear and shaped by avoidance. You might get applause, you might even get rich, but you'll always feel a hollow echo when you're alone. That echo is the sound of your unlived life calling out to you. The question is, will you keep pressing snooze, or will you finally wake up? The rebellion. How to break free. Rebellion doesn't always look like fire and fists. Sometimes the most radical act is sitting quietly in a room and finally telling yourself the truth. No more distractions, no more blaming fate, ex-lovers, toxic bosses, or childhood scars like their characters in a play you can't rewrite. The rebellion begins when you stop running and turn inward, not to punish yourself but to understand, because the only way to stop repeating the same mistakes is to meet the parts of you that keep making them. Not as enemies to be destroyed, but as exiles who have waited in the shadows for you to come home. Carl Jung didn't believe healing was about fixing the shadow. He believed it was about integrating it. To do that, you must first acknowledge that your unconscious isn't evil, it's misinformed. It still believes you're 5 years old, powerless, voiceless, vulnerable. It's been running on scripts written in the language of survival. Your rage, it was once your shield. Your self-sabotage, it was once your protection. Your emotional numbness, it kept you from drowning when no one taught you how to swim. These aren't flaws. They're adaptive responses to a world that didn't always love you correctly. But what was once protective has now become limiting, and you can't heal what you still identify with. The rebellion then begins with disidentification. You are not your patterns. You are not your mistakes. You are not even your shadow. You are the awareness behind it all, the one capable of observing, questioning, and ultimately transforming it. But awareness alone is not enough. You must make a decision to bring what is hidden into the light, no matter how uncomfortable. That means tracing the threads of your emotional reactivity. noticing when your body tightens in conversation, listening to the shame behind your perfectionism, asking again and again, what part of me is trying to speak through this behavior? This process is messy. It's not a straight line. Sometimes you'll regress. Sometimes you'll hurt people while trying to heal yourself. But that's not failure. It's feedback. The work of breaking free isn't glamorous. It's slow, awkward, and often invisible to the outside world. There are no medals for facing your deepest fears. But there is something more valuable. Sovereignty. The ability to respond to life instead of react to it. The power to choose differently, not because you read it in a book, but because your nervous system is no longer held hostage by ghosts of the past. One of the most powerful tools in this rebellion is shadow work. Not the watered-down Instagram version, but the real gut-punching kind that requires brutal honesty. Shadow work is sitting with the part of you that envies your friend's success and asking why. It's admitting that part of you enjoys being the victim because it absolves you from taking responsibility. It's looking at your life and asking, where am I benefiting from my own suffering? That question alone can shatter illusions you didn't even know you were living in. But awareness without action is spiritual entertainment. So once you see your patterns, you must disrupt them, intentionally and consistently. That means making new choices when every fiber of your body wants to repeat the old ones. It means walking away from the emotionally unavailable person, not because they hurt you, but because you finally see how you've been colluding with your own abandonment. It means saying no when your nervous system is screaming to please. It means choosing discomfort over familiarity, because familiarity is the breeding ground of the pattern. The rebellion is not about feeling better, it's about becoming real. And in becoming real, you begin to discover a deeper truth. The part of you that created the pattern is also the part of you that can undo it. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and existential psychiatrist, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That space, the one between trigger and reaction, is where the rebellion lives. The more aware you become, the more that space expands. And in that space, you can rewrite your story. This isn't about becoming fearless. It's about becoming honest. Radical honesty is the gateway to liberation. Honesty about what you want, what you resent, what you're terrified of losing, what you're tired of pretending to enjoy. This kind of honesty breaks the trance. It dismantles the roles you've been playing: good daughter, reliable friend, humble servant, achiever, caretaker, and allows you to become something infinitely more powerful, yourself. But true selfhood comes at a cost. You will lose things: relationships that only knew the mask, routines that kept you safe, identities that earned you praise. You will lose comfort. You will lose certainty, and in return, you will gain clarity, purpose, depth. Not the kind that's sold in weekend workshops or self-help books, but the kind that emerges when you look your pain in the eye and say, I see you. I know where you come from, but I choose differently now. This is the rebellion Jung envisioned. Not a war against the self, but a union with it. Not becoming better, but becoming whole. And wholeness is not about being happy all the time. It's about being able to hold contradiction, to carry both the light and the shadow, to be powerful and gentle, joyful and grieving, wounded and wise. To walk through the world knowing that your past may shape you, but it does not define you. That the mistakes you once repeated are no longer chains. They're markers on a map that led you back to yourself. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop being a character in a script you didn't write? Are you ready to meet the version of you that doesn't repeat, because they've finally remembered who they are? Because freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the ability to feel it without being controlled by it. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Imagine, for a moment, that all the chaos in your life, the repeating heartbreaks, the stalled progress, the choices that always seem to betray you, weren't mistakes at all, not in the grandest sense. What if they were messages? Not cruel punishments, not karmic debts, but sacred echoes from the depths of your psyche, trying to awaken you from a sleep so deep you mistook it for your personality. What if the part of you that has been repeating the same mistake for years is not the weakest part of you, but the most honest, the part that refuses to lie, refuses to be quiet, refuses to let you settle into a life that doesn't reflect who you truly are? Carl Jung understood this more clearly than most. He believed that what you most need will be found where you least want to look. That's why the same wounds keep appearing in different disguises, because until you confront the original source, your soul will continue to circle the same terrain. Over and over again, not out of cruelty, but insistence. Life is relentless in its desire for you to wake up, and it will keep sending you the same lesson until you are finally ready to learn it. This is not a punishment. It's grace, disguised perhaps, but grace nonetheless. Here is the ultimate truth. The self that repeats the mistake and the self that longs to break free are not enemies. They are twins separated by a wound. The part of you that sabotages, avoids, or lashes out isn't evil. It's hurt, confused, trapped in a memory of pain it was never able to process. And the mistake, the one you've made again and again, is not an indictment of your worth. It is a signpost, a flare from the unconscious, pointing you toward the one thing you've been too afraid to admit, that your suffering has meaning, that your patterns are not random, that your shadow holds not just the wreckage of your past, but the raw materials of your future. You do not heal by cutting out the shadow. You heal by making it conscious, by learning its language, honoring its origins, and integrating it into the whole. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, not by adding new parts, but by reclaiming the ones you lost. The moment you do this, the repetition loses its power. You no longer walk blindly into the same traps. You begin to feel the loop before it closes. You hear the lie before you speak it. You see the wound before you bleed again. And for the first time, you have a choice, not just intellectually, but viscerally, spiritually. The pattern is still there, but you are not its prisoner anymore. In that moment, a shift occurs. Not the superficial kind of change, the dopamine rush of a motivational quote or a fleeting epiphany, but a tectonic, cellular realignment, a knowing that cannot be unlearned. You begin to live with a kind of X-ray vision, not just into others, but into yourself. You sense when your words are armor. You feel when your smile is a mask. You catch yourself mid-lie and choose to speak the truth instead. Slowly, deliberately, you dismantle the illusion. You stop performing and start being. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop fearing the mirror and start facing it with open eyes. And what stares back is not a monster. It's a mosaic, flawed, beautiful, fractured, whole. It's all the versions of you that had to survive before you could finally learn to live. It's the scared child, the angry teenager, the lonely adult, the dreamer, the cynic, the warrior, the poet. It's all of them, all still alive inside of you, not as burdens, but as bricks in the foundation of your becoming. You are not one self. You are a cathedral of selves, each one carved by time, by trauma, by love, by loss. To know yourself is to walk those halls with reverence, to no longer run from the rooms that hold your darkest nights. This is what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. It's not a destination, it's a return to the self you were before the world told you who to be. And in that return, you realize something staggering, that even your mistakes were part of the design, that nothing was wasted, that the pain that once threatened to break you has become the doorway to your liberation. Because here's the paradox, the mistake isn't the problem. Your refusal to learn from it is. But once you see it, not just intellectually but soul deep, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" That shift changes everything. It turns your life from a passive series of accidents into an unfolding of lessons. It transforms suffering into signal. It turns your shadow into a guide. And with that, you are no longer a victim of repetition. You are a student of it. You walk into your next decision with eyes wide open. You recognize the old pattern knocking at your door, But this time, you don't invite it in. You nod. You understand. You even thank it for the years it tried to protect you. But then, you choose differently. Not because it's easy, but because now you can. So the ultimate truth is this: you are not here to avoid mistakes. You are here to become so aware, so deeply present, that even your mistakes serve your evolution, that even your darkest moments become teachers, that even your shadow becomes sacred. This is the end of the loop, not because it disappears, but because you do. The version of you that needed to repeat it dies, and something new is born, not a perfect self, but a whole one,